Our theme this month, as you know, is The Eyes Have It. And this theme actually came to me as the result of a conversation with a friend of mine who is a minister in Riverside County in Southern California. We were chatting not too long ago, and she said, "You know, I am fascinated by how many words that speak to the unfolding of our spiritual enlightenment start with the letter I." So we began to list them, as I've discussed with you the first 2 weeks of this series. And as you know from those talks, she was right. I think I could probably do a year-long series on the I words, but relax. I will contain that to 1 month, which will include next week because we started a week after the first of the month with this series. But she and I did agree, however, that there's just no coincidence that the great I am, which is the source and the substance of us all, is portrayed at its very best through words, at least in the English language, that start with the letter I. So though I've selected 4, actually 5, if you count insight and intuition as 2, there are many others that you will think of, and perhaps you've already heard me make reference to these past 2 weeks. So today's topic is insight and intuition. And you'll have a better view, understanding of why I've put those two together by the time I finish this talk. So let's start with a quote that you heard me use last week from Ernest Holmes. "We understand the infinite only to the degree that it expresses itself through us. It becomes to us that which we believe it to be." Now, just in planning for this morning's presentation, I went through the What We Believe, which is the Declaration of Principles, in its entirety that's always published in the Science of Mind magazine each month. And here's the last one. Reading glasses now. "We believe in our own soul, our own spirit, and our own destiny. For we understand that the life of all is God." It's just everywhere we look when we take the time to look. So let's look at the definitions of the 2 words in the topic for today. First of all, intuition. Intuition is the direct knowing or learning of something without conscious reasoning. It's the immediate comprehension or understanding. It's kind of like when we say, "I knew that," or "that makes sense," or "duh," like you heard in the Standing in the Light this morning. I could be the B or I could be the A. Duh, why don't I be the A? And here's the insight definition: the ability to see and understand the inner nature of things, an awareness of one's own attitudes and behavior. We'll talk more about that. So let's address intuition first. We have both an internal and an external perception of ourselves. The external perception is by appearance, but the internal one is through intuition. Both go together to make up our spirit or essence. If we were only our external perceptions, our possibilities would be limited only to what we already know or we already have. That would be like building a fence around the infinite such that we reduce spirit to our own size, so to speak. As we grow spiritually, our intuition, that which is that ability to see and understand the inner nature of things, it becomes more acute. It becomes more recognizable. We come to trust it more. It's been said that intuition is spirit knowing itself. And that includes for every emanation of spirit, which is what each of us is. So what's happening in us through the spiritual awakening or unfolding is that we are clearing a path for God to operate through us or by means of us in ever-increasing, expanding, and imaginative ways. I heard a cute little story from a teacher who instructs elementary school students in science. She had given her class an assignment to write about certain scientific phenomena, and one small boy wrote about clouds. Here's what he said. "I'm not sure how clouds get formed, but the clouds know how to do it. And that's the important thing." Is that precious or what? Cuts right through, doesn't it? What a fertile mind to come up with that explanation. And what an inspiring message that carries for us. Even when we don't always know how or why something unfolds right before our very eyes, Spirit knows how to do it. And that's the important thing. And that's what we develop the faith and the trust in. In other species in the animal kingdom, the intelligence in an animal which directs its actions, such as where to go to find food and water, is called instinct. In us, that quality is more highly developed, and it makes its conscious appearance in us as intuition. It's our highest, our greatest quality. It's God revealing itself in an endless array of ways. So through our intuitive thoughts and ideas, we're guided and supported on our journey into self-knowingness. For how could we know or understand ourselves in the absence of our own thoughts, our own ideas, our own desires? Why would we take on someone else's individuality when we have one of our own to revel in and to enjoy? You see, this universal spirit makes its presence known in us through our intuitiveness, our inner perceptiveness. But it silently awaits our recognition and our cooperation, because it does not control us. Therein lies the good news and the bad news. God's boundless energy is always available for us to use in whatever ways we choose. When we choose wisely, lovingly, rightly, compassionately, kindly, peacefully, all that is returned through us, pressed down and multiplied. When we choose poorly, selfishly, unwisely, then that too is returned through us, pressed down and magnified. So here's a little story titled Long Life, which illustrates this point. An old man was relaxing and enjoying his 100th birthday. A reporter paid him a visit and asked him what was the secret of his long life. The old man pondered that question for a moment, and then he replied, "Every night at 7 p.m., I have a glass of wine. I've heard it's good for the heart." Well, the reporter was astonished. He said, "That's all? That's all?" The old man smiled and thought for another moment and commented, "Well, that and canceling my trip on the Titanic." It's like we get what we pay for, or what we sign up for. It's our use or our misuse of the universal law of freedom that is its own reward. And intuitively, we're always guided to use this freedom to choose affirmatively, to cooperate with the attributes of God within us, which include intelligence, intuition, insight. And I want to share with you what has sometimes been called one of the secrets of the ages. I want to talk about mysticism for a moment. That doctrine or belief that it is possible to achieve communion with God through contemplation. Well, in the dictionary, the definition of mysticism is also given as any doctrine or belief that asserts the possibility of attaining an intuitive knowledge of spiritual truths through meditation and contemplation. If that be so, and I certainly believe it, then think of the mystics in our heritage, like the Buddha, like Muhammad, Moses, Emerson, Whitman. How about Holmes? Jesus. Teacher Jesus, one of the greatest mystics in our cultural history coming down through the ages, taught that as we enter into the one, capital O, meaning as we become one with God, God enters into us, becomes us, is us. Remember his words. The kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, is within. I and my Father, meaning God, are one. The God that dwells within me does the work. In fact, in the Christian tradition, the celebration of Palm Sunday is in recognition of Jesus' realization of those things. In the story of Jesus, it was his insight into these things that brought him fully into the Christ consciousness. And at that moment, spread that insight to masses in Jerusalem such that they hailed him as their king. You see, in deep moments, or in moments of deep realization, the real mystics have sensed that one life flows through all of us, and that all of us are some part of that life. That includes each of you. Each of us who believe in the reality of God. We realize that we too, through intuitive experience, know what the mystics had known, and that in truth there is nothing not to be known as we open to our acceptance in God's world, which is the acknowledging and expressing of the Christ consciousness. So this talk has been a rather detailed discussion about intuition. What about insight? You ready? In the story of Jesus, it was his insight into those quotes. The kingdom of heaven is within me. I and my Father are one. The God that dwells within me does the work. It was his insight into those quotes that in deep realization, in moments of deep realization, Jesus, as other mystics, have sensed that one life flows through all of us, and that all of us are some part of that life. That includes each one of you. That includes each of us who believe in the reality of this eternal, infinite, creative energy known as God. So, stated another way, it's the recognition, the use, and the trust in our intuition that develops within use the marvelous quality of insight. The ability to see and understand the inner nature. That inner nature of things, and to be aware of our own attitudes and behaviors. A businesswoman dragged herself home after work one day, barely made it into the house before she dropped into her favorite chair, exhausted. And her husband, seeing her weariness, fixed her a tall, cool drink and sat down beside her to offer a comforting word. "You must have had a really hard day," he said. "What happened?" "Oh," she explained, "it was terrible. The computer broke down first thing this morning, and everybody in the office had to do our own thinking all day long." And the message is, keep your mind engaged. Keep your thought processes intact. Keep your God-given qualities and abilities in use. You are the only creation in the universe, as we know it, that has the mind, the thoughts, the abilities to choose for yourself. And you are the only creation in the universe, as we know it, that contemplates upon itself. And through the process of intuitive experience, recognizes the Creator. In so doing, you have the chance, the opportunity even, to put forth that call to reveal God through your own creative, individualized self. So allow your intuition to guide you. Think always, what would divine intelligence do here? What would divine intelligence do here? Then act always according to the answer to that question by using your insight. And so it is.
And so it is.